The Amazon River flows through South America, a waterway so vast and slow-moving that it seems almost timeless in its rhythm. It begins high in the Andes Mountains, where cold streams trickle down from snow-capped peaks, gathering in small rivulets that merge and grow as they descend. These tiny streams, barely wider than a person's stride, are the humble beginnings of what will become the largest river in the world by volume. The water is clear and cold at these heights, tumbling over rocks and winding through narrow mountain valleys, gradually making its way toward the lowlands. As the water moves down from the mountains, it enters flatter terrain, and the river begins to widen. The current slows, and the water spreads out, flowing through a landscape that becomes increasingly green and lush. The river meanders gently, carving a path through the land, its banks lined with vegetation that grows thick and dense. The water is no longer clear here. It carries sediment from the mountains, giving it a brownish hue that will remain for much of its journey. This sediment is rich in nutrients, and it will eventually settle along the riverbanks and in the floodplains, enriching the soil. The Amazon River does not flow in a straight line. It curves and loops, bending back on itself in wide, lazy arcs. These bends are called meanders, and they form because the water moves more slowly on the inside of a curve than on the outside. Over time, the river shifts its course slightly, carving new paths and leaving behind old channels that become oxbow lakes, quiet crescents of water separated from the main flow. These oxbow lakes are calm and still, surrounded by vegetation, and they provide habitat for fish and other aquatic creatures. The river passes through several countries on its journey to the Atlantic Ocean. It begins in Peru, high in the mountains, and flows eastward across Brazil, touching parts of Colombia, Ecuador, and other neighboring lands. The river is so wide in some places that standing on one bank, you cannot see the other side. It is more like a moving lake than a river, its surface stretching to the horizon, rippling gently in the breeze. The water moves slowly but steadily, carrying millions of gallons toward the sea with each passing moment. The Amazon River is fed by more than 1,000 tributaries, smaller rivers and streams that flow into it from both the north and the south. Some of these tributaries are themselves massive rivers, wide and deep, carrying enormous volumes of water. They join the Amazon at various points along its length, merging their waters with the main flow. Where two rivers meet, the water often takes on different colors, one brown and heavy with sediment, the other darker or lighter depending on where it comes from. These distinct streams of water flow side by side for miles before they finally blend together completely. The river has a rhythm that follows the seasons. During the rainy season, which lasts for several months each year, the water level rises significantly. Rain falls heavily across the region, and the tributaries swell, carrying more water into the Amazon. The river spreads beyond its usual banks, flooding the surrounding forests and plains. These floodplains, called varzias, are submerged for months at a time, creating a unique environment where trees stand in water and fish swim among the roots. The flooding is a natural and expected part of the river's cycle, and the land has adapted to these seasonal changes. When the dry season arrives, the water level gradually drops. The river retreats to its main channel, and the floodplains dry out, at least partially. The exposed land is covered with nutrient-rich sediment left behind by the receding water, and grasses and other plants quickly take root. This seasonal flooding and drying creates a dynamic landscape that changes throughout the year, and the creatures that live here have learned to move with the water, migrating to follow the river's rhythm. The Amazon River carries an enormous amount of water. It discharges more water into the ocean than any other river in the world, releasing a volume so great that it affects the salinity of the Atlantic Ocean for miles offshore. The fresh water from the river flows out into the sea, creating a plume that can be detected far from the coast. This outflow of fresh water influences ocean currents and marine life in the area, and it has been doing so for countless years. The water in the Amazon is generally warm, warmed by the tropical sun that shines down on the river for most of the year. The temperature remains fairly constant, rarely fluctuating much even between seasons. This warmth, combined with the abundance of water and nutrients, creates ideal conditions for life. The river is teeming with living things, from microscopic organisms to large fish, all adapted to the warm, slow-moving water. The riverbed beneath the water is covered with sediment, a soft layer of mud and silt that has accumulated over time. In some places, the river is quite shallow, only a few feet deep, while in others it plunges to depths of over 100 feet. The deepest parts are found in the main channel, where the current has carved out a trough over thousands of years. The sediment on the bottom is constantly shifting, moved by the slow current, and the shape of the riverbed changes gradually over time. Sandbars and islands dot the river, emerging from the water in some places and disappearing in others. These sandbars shift with the current and the changing water levels, and they are never quite the same from one year to the next. Some islands are large enough to support vegetation, with trees and grasses taking root in the sediment. Others are bare and temporary, destined to be washed away when the river rises again. The Amazon River flows through a vast basin, a low-lying area that collects water from an enormous expanse of land. This basin is one of the largest drainage systems in the world, covering millions of square miles. Water from across this entire region eventually makes its way into the river, flowing downhill from mountains, hills, and plateaus. The basin itself is mostly flat, with only gentle slopes, and the river meanders across this flat land in wide, sweeping curves. The banks of the river are lined with trees and dense vegetation. In some places, the forest comes right down to the water's edge, the trees leaning out over the river, their roots exposed and tangled. In other places, there are clearings and open areas, where grasses grow tall and the land is more open. The vegetation along the riverbanks is constantly interacting with the water, and when the river floods, the trees and plants are submerged, creating a flooded forest environment. The Amazon River has been flowing for millions of years, carving its path through the continent, shaping the land. The river is ancient, and the landscape it moves through bears the marks of its long history. The sediment it carries comes from rocks that have eroded over eons, ground down by rain and wind and water until they are fine particles that float in the river's current. This sediment will eventually settle, building up layers on the riverbed and along the banks, a slow process that continues year after year. The river is home to a remarkable diversity of fish. There are thousands of species living in its waters, from tiny minnows to large catfish that can weigh hundreds of pounds. These fish have adapted to the river's conditions, to its warm water and seasonal changes. Some fish migrate up and down the river, following the changing water levels and searching for food. Others remain in one area, finding everything they need in a small stretch of the river. One of the most well-known fish in the Amazon is the arapaima, a large fish with tough, armor-like scales. The arapaima is one of the largest freshwater fish in the world, growing to lengths of over 6 feet in some cases. It is an air breather, coming to the surface regularly to gulp air into a modified swim bladder that acts like a lung. This adaptation allows the arapaima to survive in water that may be low in oxygen, a common condition in the warm, slow-moving parts of the river. The arapaima moves slowly through the water, a large and somewhat prehistoric-looking creature that has been in the river for thousands of years. There are also many smaller fish, including tetras, which are colorful and active, darting through the water in schools. These small fish feed on insects, plants, and tiny aquatic organisms, and they are in turn eaten by larger predators. The river's food web is complex, with many layers of predators and prey, all interconnected. The abundance of life in the river depends on the constant flow of nutrients brought down from the mountains and cycled through the ecosystem. Catfish of various kinds are abundant in the Amazon. Some are quite large, with long whisker-like barbels that they use to sense their surroundings in the murky water. These catfish are bottom feeders, searching the riverbed for food, using their sensitive barbels to detect worms, crustaceans, and other small creatures hiding in the sediment. They move slowly and deliberately, patient hunters that rely on stealth rather than speed. The river is also home to stingrays, flat fish that glide along the bottom, their bodies shaped like discs with long tails trailing behind. These freshwater stingrays are different from their ocean cousins, but they share the same basic body plan. They bury themselves in the sand or mud, waiting for prey to come close, and then they pounce, using their mouths to suck up small fish and invertebrates. The stingrays have a venomous spine on their tails, which they use for defense, but they are generally peaceful creatures, content to rest on the riverbed. Dolphins also live in the Amazon River, a surprising fact to many who think of dolphins as ocean animals. These river dolphins are smaller than ocean dolphins, with longer snouts and more flexible necks, adaptations that help them navigate the complex underwater environment of the river. The most famous of these is the pink river dolphin, also known as the boto. The boto is a pale pink color, though some individuals are more gray, and it moves slowly through the water, using echolocation to find fish in the murky current. The boto's eyesight is poor, as it has little need for vision in the turbid water, and it relies almost entirely on sound to navigate and hunt. The pink river dolphin is often seen near the river's surface, coming up to breathe with a slow, rolling motion. It is a solitary creature for the most part, though sometimes small groups are seen together. The boto is gentle and curious, occasionally approaching boats or swimmers, though it is shy and will retreat if startled. There are many stories and legends about the boto, told by the people who live along the river, and the dolphin holds a special place in local culture. Caimans, relatives of alligators and crocodiles, are found along the river's edges and in the quieter backwaters. These reptiles spend much of their time in the water, their bodies submerged with only their eyes and nostrils above the surface. They are patient hunters, waiting motionless for fish or other prey to come within reach. Caimans are generally not aggressive toward humans, and they are more likely to slip quietly into the water and swim away than to confront anyone. They bask on the riverbanks during the day, absorbing warmth from the sun, their bodies stretched out on the sand or mud. There are also turtles in the river, including the giant river turtle, which can grow quite large. These turtles are slow-moving and spend much of their time submerged, coming to the surface occasionally to breathe. They feed on vegetation and fruits that fall into the water, and during certain times of the year, they gather in large numbers on sandbars to lay their eggs. The females dig nests in the sand, depositing dozens of eggs before covering them and returning to the water. The eggs incubate in the warm sand, and after several weeks, the hatchlings emerge and make their way to the river. The Amazon River is surrounded by a landscape that is shaped by water. The floodplains stretch for miles on either side of the main channel, and during the rainy season, these areas become vast shallow lakes. Trees stand in the water, their trunks submerged, and fish swim among the roots and through the flooded undergrowth. This flooded forest is a unique habitat, a place where aquatic and terrestrial environments merge. The water is rich with nutrients, washed down from the land, and it supports a dense population of fish and other aquatic creatures. When the water is high, many fish move into the flooded forest to feed. They eat fruits and seeds that fall from the trees, and some fish have even adapted to crack open hard seeds with their strong jaws. This interaction between the forest and the river is an important part of the ecosystem, and the trees benefit as well, as the fish help to disperse their seeds to new locations. The seeds pass through the fish's digestive system and are deposited elsewhere, sometimes taking root and growing into new trees. The rhythm of the river, the rising and falling of the water, creates a predictable cycle that many creatures depend on. Birds know when the water will be low, exposing sandbars and mudflats where they can feed. Fish know when the water will rise, flooding the forest and providing new feeding grounds. This cycle has been repeating for thousands of years, and the life in and around the river has adapted to it completely. The Amazon River has been an important part of human life for thousands of years. Indigenous peoples have lived along its banks since ancient times, building their lives around the river's rhythm. They fish in its waters, travel along its length in canoes, and use the river as a source of water and food. The river is central to their cultures, woven into their stories and traditions. They have a deep understanding of the river, knowing where the fish gather, when the water will rise, and how to navigate its many channels and tributaries. Many communities along the river are built on stilts, raised above the ground to avoid the seasonal flooding. These houses are simple structures, made from wood and thatch, designed to be functional and adaptable. When the water rises, the houses remain dry, and the people continue their daily lives, using canoes to move from place to place. The river is both a highway and a resource, connecting communities that might otherwise be isolated. Fishing is a way of life for many people along the Amazon. They use nets, traps, and lines to catch fish, and they know the river intimately, understanding its currents and the behavior of its fish. Fishing is often done in the early morning or late afternoon, when the fish are most active. The catch is brought back to the community, where it is prepared and eaten or sold. Fish is a staple of the diet here, providing protein and essential nutrients. Travel along the river is slow and steady. Canoes and small boats move with the current, paddling or using small motors to navigate the channels. Larger boats and riverboats carry goods and passengers from one town to another, their journeys measured in days rather than hours. The river is wide and the distances are great, and travel requires patience. The boats move at a relaxed pace, and passengers often spend their time watching the riverbank slide by, observing the wildlife and the changing landscape. The river has inspired many stories and legends. Some cultures believe the river is home to spirits or mythical creatures, beings that protect the water and the life within it. The boto, the pink river dolphin, features prominently in these stories. In some legends, the boto can transform into a human, coming ashore during festivals and celebrations. These stories are passed down through generations, part of the rich oral tradition of the people who live along the river. There are also tales of giant serpents and enchanted beings that live in the depths of the river, creatures that are rarely seen but always present in the collective imagination. These stories reflect a deep respect for the river and an understanding of its power and mystery. The river is vast and ancient, and it holds secrets that have not been fully discovered. The Amazon River has been explored by outsiders for centuries, though it remains a challenging and remote place. Early European explorers traveled up the river, searching for resources and attempting to map its course. These expeditions were difficult, as the river is wide and complex, with many tributaries and channels that can be confusing to navigate. The explorers faced heat, insects, disease, and the challenge of traveling through dense vegetation and difficult terrain. Over time, more people came to the region, drawn by the resources the river and its surroundings offered. Rubber was harvested from trees in the surrounding areas, and the river became a route for transporting goods. Towns and settlements grew along the riverbanks, and the river became a lifeline for trade and communication. Despite this human activity, much of the river remains wild and untouched, its vastness protecting it from complete development. The Amazon River continues to shape the land through which it flows. The sediment it carries is constantly being deposited, building up the riverbed and the floodplains. Over time, this sediment can accumulate into new land, creating islands and altering the river's course. The river is never static. It is always moving, always changing, though these changes happen so slowly that they are barely noticeable in a human lifetime. The water in the river is constantly being renewed. Rain falls across the basin, flowing into streams and tributaries that feed the main river. The water moves downstream, toward the ocean, and eventually, it reaches the sea. There, it evaporates into the atmosphere, forming clouds that drift back over the land, where they release their moisture as rain once again. This cycle has been happening for millions of years, a slow and steady circulation of water around the planet. The Amazon River is affected by the tides, even though it is far from the ocean. The tidal influence reaches inland for hundreds of miles, causing the water level to rise and fall slightly with the rhythm of the ocean's tides. This tidal effect is subtle, but it is another example of how the river is connected to larger natural systems. The river is not isolated. It is part of a vast network of water that includes the ocean, the atmosphere, and the land. At the mouth of the river, where it meets the Atlantic Ocean, the water is fresh for miles offshore. The outflow is so great that sailors could dip their buckets into the ocean and draw up fresh water, long before they could see land. This phenomenon was noted by early explorers, who were amazed to find fresh water in the middle of the sea. The mixing of fresh water and salt water at the river's mouth creates a unique environment, and the area is rich with nutrients, supporting abundant marine life. The river's mouth is not a single channel but a wide delta, with many branches and islands. The water spreads out as it approaches the ocean, dividing into multiple streams that flow around sandbars and mudflats. This delta is a dynamic place, constantly reshaped by the river and the tides. The sediment carried by the river is deposited here, building up land and creating new islands. Some of these islands are temporary, washed away during storms or high water, while others become more permanent, eventually supporting vegetation and wildlife. The Amazon River influences the climate of the entire region. The vast amount of water it contains and transports helps to moderate temperatures, keeping the area warm and humid. The river also contributes to the formation of clouds and rain, as water evaporates from its surface and rises into the atmosphere. This moisture is carried by winds across the region, where it falls as rain, feeding the river and its tributaries once again. The river and the climate are intimately connected, each influencing the other in a continuous cycle. The river has a calming presence, a sense of timelessness that comes from its slow, steady flow. Standing on its banks, you can watch the water move past, rippling gently, carrying leaves and bits of wood downstream. The sound of the water is soft, a gentle murmur that blends with the calls of birds and the rustle of leaves. The river is never truly silent, but the sounds it makes are peaceful, a constant background that becomes almost hypnotic after a while. There is a quietness to the river, despite its size. It does not rush or roar, it simply flows, moving at its own pace. The current is strong but steady, and the water seems almost patient, as if it knows it will eventually reach the ocean and there is no need to hurry. This quality makes the river a place of reflection and calm, a place where time seems to slow down. The river's surface changes throughout the day. In the morning, it is often smooth and glassy, reflecting the sky and the surrounding vegetation. As the day progresses and the wind picks up, small ripples appear, and the surface becomes more textured. By evening, the light changes, and the river takes on golden and amber tones, glowing softly in the fading sun. At night, the river becomes dark and mysterious, its surface barely visible, though the sound of the water continues, a constant presence in the darkness. The Amazon River is home to many plants that grow in or near the water. Water lilies float on the surface in quieter areas, their large leaves spreading out and their flowers rising above the water. Some of these lilies are enormous, with leaves several feet across, strong enough to support small animals. The flowers bloom for a short time, opening in the evening and closing by morning, a gentle cycle that repeats throughout the growing season. Grasses grow along the riverbanks and in the shallow water, their roots anchoring them in the soft mud. These grasses sway gently with the current, bending and flexing but not breaking. They provide habitat for small fish and insects, and they help to stabilize the riverbank, preventing erosion. During the dry season, when the water level is low, the grasses grow thick and green, covering the exposed land. Reeds and sedges also grow in the shallow areas, tall plants with slender stalks that rise several feet above the water. These plants create dense stands that provide shelter for birds and other animals. The reeds rustle softly in the breeze, a sound that blends with the quiet murmur of the river. The Amazon River is also home to various aquatic plants that grow beneath the surface. These submerged plants provide food for fish and other aquatic creatures, and they help to oxygenate the water. They grow in areas where there is enough light, usually in the shallower parts of the river or in the clearer tributary streams. The plants sway with the current, their leaves undulating gently, creating an underwater landscape that is peaceful and serene. Birds are abundant along the river, drawn by the wealth of food and habitat it provides. Herons stand in the shallow water, waiting patiently for fish to swim within reach. They are tall and slender, with long legs and sharp beaks, perfectly adapted for wading and hunting. When a fish comes close, the heron strikes quickly, spearing it with its beak and swallowing it whole. Then the heron resumes its patient stance, waiting for the next opportunity. Kingfishers are also common along the river. These small, colorful birds perch on branches overhanging the water, watching for fish below. When they spot a target, they dive into the water with a quick splash, grabbing the fish in their beak before returning to their perch. Kingfishers are skilled hunters, and they spend much of their day watching the water, diving and catching fish with impressive accuracy. Egrets, with their white plumage and graceful movements, are often seen wading in the shallows or perched in trees along the riverbank. They feed on fish, frogs, and other small aquatic creatures, moving slowly and deliberately through the water. Their white feathers stand out against the green vegetation, making them easy to spot, and they often gather in small groups, feeding together in companionable silence. Cormorants swim in the river, diving beneath the surface to catch fish. They are strong swimmers, using their webbed feet to propel themselves underwater. After catching a fish, they surface and swallow it, then dive again. Cormorants often rest on rocks or fallen logs, spreading their wings to dry in the sun, as their feathers are not completely waterproof. The Amazon River is a place of abundance, but it is also a place of balance. The life it supports is interconnected, each species depending on others in a complex web of relationships. The river provides water, food, and habitat, and in return, the creatures that live here contribute to the river's health. Fish eat aquatic plants, keeping them from overgrowing. Birds eat fish, controlling their populations. Decomposers break down dead plant and animal matter, returning nutrients to the water. This balance has been maintained for thousands of years, and it continues today. The river's flow is influenced by the landscape through which it passes. In some areas, the river is confined by higher ground, and it flows more quickly, channeling through a narrower space. In other areas, the land is flat and open, and the river spreads out, slowing down and meandering across the landscape. These variations in flow create different habitats, each with its own characteristics. In the faster-flowing sections, the water is more oxygenated, and different species of fish are found here. In the slower sections, the water is warmer and calmer, and plants grow more abundantly. The diversity of habitats along the river contributes to the overall diversity of life, as each species finds the conditions it needs to thrive. The Amazon River is also affected by the changing climate. Variations in rainfall can cause the river to rise or fall more than usual, and these fluctuations can have significant effects on the surrounding ecosystem. In years of heavy rainfall, the flooding is more extensive and more land is submerged. In years of drought, the water level drops lower than normal, and some areas that are usually wet become dry. The life in and around the river is resilient, adapted to these variations, but extreme changes can be challenging. The river is a source of life and nourishment, but it is also a place of stillness and peace. Its slow, steady flow is calming, and the rhythms of the river create a sense of continuity and stability. The water moves on, day after day, year after year, flowing toward the ocean, carrying with it the sediment and nutrients that will sustain life downstream. The Amazon River is vast, ancient, and enduring. It has been here long before humans walked the earth, and it will likely be here long after. Its waters have witnessed the rise and fall of countless generations of plants and animals, and it continues to flow, indifferent to the passage of time. The river is a reminder of the natural world's power and permanence, a force that shapes the land and sustains life on a grand scale. The river's journey from the mountains to the sea is long and slow, a process that takes weeks for a single drop of water to complete. Along the way, the water is joined by other water from rain and tributaries, and it carries with it the stories of the land it has passed through. The sediment in the water comes from rocks high in the Andes, ground down over millennia. The nutrients in the water come from the soil, washed into the river by rain. The river is a collector, gathering the contributions of the entire basin and carrying them toward the ocean. At the end of its journey, the river releases its water into the sea, completing the cycle. The fresh water mixes with the salt water, and the sediment settles on the ocean floor or is carried by ocean currents to distant places. The nutrients support marine life near the coast, and the river's influence extends far beyond its mouth. The water that was once high in the mountains is now part of the ocean, and eventually it will evaporate and return to the sky, beginning the cycle once again. The Amazon River is a place of quiet wonder, a reminder of the natural processes that have shaped our planet. Its flow is constant and unhurried, and its presence is calming. The river is a symbol of continuity, of the endless cycle of water moving through the Earth systems, sustaining life and shaping the landscape. It is a place where time seems to move differently, where the rhythms of nature are slow and steady, and where the world feels vast and ancient. The water in the river is the same water that has flowed here for millions of years, cycled through the atmosphere, the land, and the sea, and returned again. It is part of a system that is much larger than any single river, a global cycle of water that connects all the Earth's ecosystems. The Amazon River is a part of this cycle, a vital artery that carries water from the mountains to the ocean, nourishing the land along the way. The river's banks are lined with vegetation that depends on the water. Trees grow tall, their roots reaching down into the moist soil, drawing up water and nutrients. Vines hang from the branches, and ferns grow in the shade. The riverbank is a transition zone, a place where land and water meet, and it supports a rich diversity of life. Insects buzz among the flowers, birds flit through the branches, and small mammals scurry through the undergrowth. The river provides moisture and nutrients, and in return, the vegetation helps to stabilize the banks, preventing erosion and filtering the water. The Amazon River is also home to many insects, including dragonflies and damselflies that flit above the water's surface. These insects spend their larval stage in the water, living as aquatic nymphs that hunt for small prey. When they mature, they emerge from the water and take to the air, their wings glistening in the sunlight. Dragonflies are skilled flyers, darting and hovering with ease, and they feed on mosquitoes and other small insects, helping to control their populations. Mosquitoes are abundant near the river, as they breed in standing water. The adults feed on nectar and plant juices, though the females also need blood to produce eggs. They are most active at dawn and dusk, and their high-pitched buzzing is a familiar sound along the river. Despite their reputation as pests, mosquitoes are an important food source for many animals, including fish, birds, and bats. Butterflies are also common along the river, drawn by the flowers and the moisture. They flutter through the air, landing on leaves and blossoms to feed. Some butterflies are brightly colored, with wings of blue, orange, or yellow, while others are more subdued, with brown or gray patterns that help them blend in with their surroundings. Butterflies are gentle creatures, and watching them as they move from flower to flower is a calming experience. The Amazon River is a place where life unfolds slowly and quietly. The creatures that live here are not in a hurry. They move at the pace of the river itself, unhurried and steady. Fish swim lazily through the water, birds wade carefully in the shallows, and insects drift on the breeze. There is a sense of timelessness here, as if the river exists outside the normal flow of time, in a space where the only thing that matters is the slow movement of water and the gentle rhythm of life. The river is a source of tranquility, a place where the mind can rest and the body can relax. The sound of the water, the sight of the slow current, and the feel of the humid air all combine to create an atmosphere of peace. The river asks nothing of those who come to it. It simply flows, offering its calm presence and its steady rhythm. It is a place where worries can be set aside, where the complexity of the world fades into the background, and where there is only the river, the water, and the quiet passage of time. The Amazon River will continue to flow long after this moment has passed. Its waters will carry sediment and nutrients, its currents will shape the land, and its rhythms will sustain the life that depends on it. The river is a constant, a presence that endures, and in its flow, there is a kind of comfort, a reminder that some things remain steady even as the world changes. The river flows on, moving slowly toward the sea, patient and timeless, a gentle force that has been here since the beginning and will be here long into the future.